Podcasting from the Lone Star State in Southern California, you're listening to the Coma Podcast with Cody and Matt.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the Coma Cast. We just wanted to real quick mention some breaking news occurring this Thursday. The U.S. House of Representatives has passed the Equality Act, offering protection for LGBTQ people. Now, they passed it 224 to 206 today. Now, it aims to expand civil rights for LGBTQ Americans and ban discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity. Now, this act had been introduced multiple times since the 1970s and most recently passed the House in 2019. But when it was sent to the Senate, it was struck down by the then Republican-led Senate. This will now go to the Democrat-led Senate, where they will bring it up for consideration. So we'll keep an eye on if the Equality Act passes the House and Senate combined, and then go to the president's desk. But now we'll continue our conversation that me and Matt were having earlier today. Matt, how has your week gone?
Well, a lot better than last week.
Yeah. I mean, I guess there's not a very high bar for that.
Yeah, the bar is on the ground. Things in Texas are slowly getting back to normal. So we slipped over to Target earlier to try to see what was in stock, and we were able to get a thing of milk. I'm lactose intolerant, so there was only 3 containers of lactose milk in the in the whole building. So we grabbed one. We only got one, and left the rest because that's all we needed.
Yeah.
And bread is still not there, and everything else that we might have needed was not in stock either. But there was not a madhouse rush, and it seems most things are open, most stores are open. There's kind of a general flow again. The frantic air has lifted.
Yeah.
Which is good. That's a good thing.
For sure.
We stayed away from everything as much as possible per usual. That's something I would have done anyway, even when I lived in Florida. When Hurricane Charlie hit and destroyed my town and Orlando, because I was moving to college that week. So you just sort of roll with it. You get what you have to get, and then you stay back, and you just deal with being a little uncomfortable for a while. It's not that, I don't want to say it's not that big of a deal for people who are more directly affected. It is a huge deal, which is why if you aren't as severely affected, just be uncomfortable for a few weeks and let the people who really need these resources step to the front of the line. If it's completely crazy, there's only one of something, and you don't really need it, you don't really need it. I mean, that.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's kind of how that goes. I actually took a nap today. Fatigue is still very real. You and I were supposed to actually do this a few hours ago, and I was like, I don't really feel so good. And then
he was out.
The feeling hit me, and I texted you and said, okay, I think I need to lay down. And I never even saw your response. I'm wearing a button up kind of like flannel shirt over my t-shirt because it's like 50 outside right now and raining. And I put it in my shirt, like on my chest, just under my shirt, and I was gone. I mean, I just happened to set it down and rolled over, and I woke up an hour and a half later and I was like, okay, I'm awake. I'm okay.
It's always good to get some sleep when you need it. Your body's like, it's a must.
Right, my sleep schedule is it's really off from last week. I think I slept 3 or 4 hours last night. I was having stressful dreams, and I don't even know why. I mean, I'm fine. But apparently my brain was like, hey, let's stress you out a little bit.
I mean, your sleep schedule is already crazy, so to make it even crazier.
I, for the most part, had it to a place where I was waking up every day between 8 and 9:30 in the morning, starting my day, and I had that rolling for probably just over a month or two, and with a few days that were hiccups, but overall, a nice, easy pattern, and then it went to hell in a handbasket. Yay! So we're still kind of working on getting it back, but I was in my dream. I was trying to turn an alarm off. So I was hearing the beep of it. When you disturb an alarm, you have 10, 30 seconds or whatever to turn it off. So in my dream, I was trying to turn it off, and I kept missing a digit because I couldn't reach it. It was like slightly out of my reach in the dream. So when I woke up, I also had to go to the bathroom apparently, but I woke up and I was like, is that real? Am I hearing my alarm? Is it beeping? And I'm, when you're starting to wake up and it's
You're in your
5
own
o'clock
dream.
this morning. It's 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. I've only been asleep 3 hours or so, and I don't know if it's real or not. Wait, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, hopefully that you'll be able to get back on schedule or somewhat normal
Right.
schedule going forward.
I would like that very much.
A little update on Ella. We talked about on Tuesday that I had to take Ella to the vet this weekend, and she was kind of really sick. And we got her medicine, and they said 24, 48 hours. So we let that pass, and she's doing a lot better. She had like urine crystals or crystals in her bladder. And so it was causing some issues with her urinary tract and causing her to bleed a little. And that's when we first noticed it, her going in and out of the litter box, like I had mentioned, and then a little bit of blood in the urine. But we got her home, started giving her the medicine. And it's like really exciting because we're like, oh my God, you're peeing a lot and you're not going to the litter box that often. Like, it's like, we want you to pee, but we don't want you to pee. So you need to go all the time.
Right. It's like you're going once instead of 30, like one long trip instead of 30 tiny trips. Luckily, pills and stuff like that are super easy to fix in young, especially, I mean, she's really young. So it's a super easy fix since you took her to the vet right away.
Yeah, we had the medicine and she has like 4 different medicines. So it's 3 times a day, different ones and different combinations and whatever. Some of them are 2 times a day. They're all like liquid medicine that we have to syringe into her mouth. And that's quite a show. We have to like get a blanket, hold her down. She is a strong little girl and she tries with all her might not to take that medicine. She knows it's happening because she gets a sense of it and she starts running away from me and like, girl. So like, this is helping.
So how we did it with Simon, we used the scruff, we held him, but we used the scruff and kind of tilted him back so it opened his mouth, and we used just like the pill gun and we just slid it through the side of his teeth and then just drained it down the back. And it was 30 seconds from loading we prepped everything first, then got him, and then bloop, done. I mean,
yeah. So
it's much better than wrapping them up and wrestling them. It's less stressful for them too, and you, and less chance.
Yeah, we get her. We put her on the blanket and put her on the table, and then she's all set up. The one thing that has annoyed me though. Disagree. Do what?
She might disagree with the term setup.
The one thing that I have been annoyed about this whole thing, obviously I hate that she's like wasn't feeling good and everything, but she has to be on urinary tract type medicine for the system in cats. And so overall there's like about 3 big prescription brands, and they all do a great job, all have great reviews on doing a good job for what they're supposed to do. The thing that annoys me is they're a little pricey, which is fine because she already got a little pricey food. But the ingredients in these cat foods is horrible. Like we had when we first got her, she was like on Purina Pro Plan, which like a lot of people, I mean, I don't want to say a lot of people, but it's kind of considered like the brand or one of the top brands. You start researching that it is not. It's like one of the lowest brands. And honestly, I think Petco kicked them out of the store because they were using a lot of fillers. And Petco, if you're in a Petco store now, most of all the foods and treats don't have external and extra fillers because they're unnecessary and they're actually bad for your cat. And so I'm so annoyed. She was getting this really nice, high quality food, and now she's getting a sub-quality food with the medicine in it that she needs. I'm like, ugh. But
that parenting is great.
It's like, can we not have a really good food with high quality ingredients and what she needs? But they want to make as much money as they can, so they put cheap food in it and then say, we're going to charge you $80 for this. But
yeah,
I guess that's my little cat rant today. Salem is being good today. He's sleeping in the
Ava has
sun.
been, I don't know what it is. She's been a complete terror.
You
So
were
my
telling me she
office,
was running around the other night.
it, I'm speaking calmly, but so my office is also the guest room, and there's like a little owl that's like a can like a warmer. Sorry,
Mm-hmm.
that's the term. Wow, and she's really good at this point. Like we've got her to where she doesn't mess with cords or anything, but something about that particular power cord is very short. It's not like it's dangling off everywhere, and it's even out of view. Um, she goes and messes with it constantly. And they have slept under the guest bed. It's not unusual for them to sleep under the guest bed of whichever office it's in because they come in and
Yeah.
sleep in whatever room we're working in. And that's normal. They've done that. Luna's done it her whole life, and Ava's done it since we got her. We got her early September. By the end of September, mimicking Luna, she
Mm-hmm.
figured out where she could and couldn't go. And other than, okay, we don't jump on tables, for the most part, it's been real easy. She will not leave this damn cord alone, which for the most part, it's, 2 seconds. So you all can't see it, but Cody can see it. We have what's called that was the shaking of a bad kitty bottle. It's a giant spray bottle.
If you're watching it on video, you saw his kitty bottle.
Yeah, so if you'd hear the shaking of the water. But I don't know what it is. So we spray a deterrent on, the same one I've been trying to convince Cody to buy, but Cody won't listen to me because Cody doesn't.
Okay, first of all, they don't chew on anything. Ella only chews on the Christmas tree and there's no tree
Right.
up. So
This is the same
I didn't
deterrent
buy
that I'm
it.
trying to get you to spray on the tree because it works. But Cody's like, no, I know, it's gonna work. It's not my Ella. Like I don't have I'm on my third and fourth cat. Like I didn't have a giant dog and two cats that's twice the size of Ella, and one of them being a giant ginger male jerk. Oh my god, that ginger jerk! I loved him, but you're not really. Are you really a pet owner if your pet hasn't tested your 12 steps on a Friday afternoon? Um, and you love them. You love them with all your heart and soul. You would do anything for them to keep them healthy and safe, and sometimes healthy and safe. And sometimes you're like, somebody else needs to come in and keep you healthy and safe from me if you do not stop your nonsense, little one. Like you kind of have
Salem.
like a stare off from across the room. It's like which one of you is going to kill the other first. You're like, yeah. And then 2 minutes later they're cuddling on your lap. But no, so Ava won't leave it alone. And I was writing the other night, and that is one of the few things that if I lock myself in, if I'm working in my office and I'm
Mm-hmm.
writing, that I have to kind of have some silence on because I can't. It's really the only thing I need to do where I need to focus.
Yeah.
And I finally gave up. I could not get Ava to leave me alone.
Yeah.
And then, or leave anything alone. I don't know why. It's very unusual for her to do that. What she was doing is really like out of character. So I came into my office today and was working, and she was doing the same damn thing. And David is on hold with unemployment, which today is the first day in a month and a half that he's been able to call them and even be on hold. Every other time it's like, call back later, call back later, call back later. And I'm like, so I'm trying to, and he's also doing his homework while he's on hold. So,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just working in my office and she won't stop. I mean, and I have to get up. And so if you tell your pet no, one of the people a lot of times don't like cats because they think that they're a dog and cats won't be controlled. And I've often found when people say, I don't like cats, and they're very specific about it, usually because you're kind of controlling and you want to control a cat. That's not how it works. You have to do things differently. So if you tell the cat to stop what it's doing, you have to get up and go shoo the cat away from what it's doing. Every time you tell them no, like, you don't need to beat your cat. Like, that's not, people do the dumbest things and they're like, my cat doesn't like me. I'm like, really? They don't like you. I can't believe that. We discipline our cats with things like, no, stop. We shoo them. Every time we tell them no, we shoo them away. We shake the water bottle. Like very minor things that just where they're not afraid of us because they still cuddle with us, they still sleep with us, they still, we can pick them up, we
We
don't have problems.
we
But
actually the other night, so because we got Discovery Plus, we added another streaming service to our lineup. But they have all the episodes of like the old Discovery or TLC or something show, Cat from Hell, where it was the cat behaviorist that would go in and whatever. First of all, it ran for like 11 or 13 seasons. I can't remember.
yes,
A
I've heard. So
long
I was afraid to watch it
time.
because I've seen some absolute horror stories. Because you know, like cats, like humans and dogs and any other pet, run in a variety of personalities. Some of them don't want anything to do with you, and also it depends on when you brought them inside. There is a line when you adopt a kitten, say like a stray kitten, where they're probably going to be feral or semi-feral their entire life. It There is a line with that, and it's very hard to explain to people, and they think they're so, superior to animals or whatever. I'm like, I'd like to let you know that if you look around the world, we spend all of our time trying to kill each other and being cruel to each other and ignoring each other. We're Humans and cats are not that different. We like to think that we're loving and caring, but really, we're kind of not. Some cats eat their young, and I don't know if people notice, but some people are really crappy parents. The
The
parallels are real. Just some people shed a little less.
Yeah, the
Um,
one thing that I took away from it is that a lot of times there was these couples and someone had the cat and the cat would come into the family essentially, like the boyfriend would join and he didn't have a cat. The one episode I saw, the girl had two cats. The guy didn't like cats, but they were together and he did not want the cat in the bedroom. And it was causing issues because then the cat would make a lot of noise under the door, and he was so mad about that. And the guy came in and was like, well, I really prefer people not have exclusion zones. Like the cat should have reign of the house or like access to the house. You preventing it from going into a room is the reason why it's doing this. He would not back down. And I guess it stayed that way. The cat improved a little bit, but I was like, that's the reason the cat doesn't really like you though, because of that. But
yeah, you're being a jerk. Like the cat is not a child, but in a lot of ways pets and children are treated similar in the sense of like, okay, we don't let you do that because it could kill you. We don't let a child run out into the street. We don't let our pets run out into the street because they're not going to be able to dodge a speeding car or even a moving car. But at the same time, there's a reason cats are deadly hunters when needed.
Yeah.
That they still have instincts, and that messing with your cat or trying to provoke it, not a bad idea. And typically I found that if my cat doesn't like something, there might be a reason for it. We did have
Yeah.
one person that we kind of made friends with and we're kind of leery about, and Luna wasn't a fan, and I was pretty sure, and then within a few hours the person kind of showed their ass and I was like, okay, yeah, definitely not happening. There was something exciting I've been meaning to share with you, that I was gonna text it to you today, but I opened today's text messages with Cody by sending him the proof that the DAs have finally obtained Trump's tax returns. And Cody, I apologize for starting with essentially something so racy, but what I did the last couple of days, so since I went on my meds, I pretty much stopped writing for most of this first 90 days because my brain just wasn't there. It's just kind of taken me a while to kind of reprocess everything and kind of find a new normal for myself. And as we've leveled out more, I've felt more like writing again. So the last couple of days. So the way I wrote my book was I wrote it, essentially freehanded it. I have one document that's the actual story. And then I have a second document that I always have open simultaneously that I have character lists in, what I did with it, a story idea, a story note, and I put dates on it. So I let David read a copy of this over summer, like July, August. I finished the beta copy in July. So at the end of July, David read it. This had every story note. There are things like when I thought of something I wanted, I went ahead and wrote the scene if I had the idea for it. And then later went in and put new stuff either before or after, and kind of organize it as I went. But I was trying to not get particular because I was just trying to freehand it and then go back. So I went over in the last 2 days. I've gone over the entire thing, all eight. The document's about 82 pages of my words. It's about 56,000 words right now. And I went through and I put it in the exact order it's supposed to be in. I cleared every single note out. I organized my note document as well, which was about 20,000 words in itself.
Wow.
And cut it down to about 15,000 of like concise notes. I put in exactly what pages, what scenes are missing, and in what pages they're going to go in. And I cleared every single note in the Word document as well. Every update, from where the story actually started to what it is now. I actually had it set in a real world, like a fictional version of a real world setting. And I realized that if I made one slip up, it could come off as massively culturally insensitive, even though that's not even what my book's about. I realized it could completely just go a different direction. So I unwound it myself. I stopped for a few weeks, decided, because I didn't want to build a whole world. I didn't think I could do that. That wasn't really in my plan. I just wanted to freehand this and tell the story I wanted to tell. That's not what happened. So I sat down and rebuilt this whole world, and I don't really know how it sounds to anybody else, but in my head, here's where we are. And so I had to update everything from like the ground up, and I had done it. I've done it. So in the last 48 hours, that is completely done. And there is a light at the end of the tunnel for a final copy of this.
That's exciting.
So when we're done with this, I am going to go back to my laptop, and this week I'm going to try to write there's about 8 scenes that need written. So we're talking maybe 5,000-6,000 words. 3 of those scenes are already written. I just need to kind of adjust them for where they are in the story, correct the tenses, make sure characters sound like how they're supposed to sound, because I didn't know how to give them a voice. So I had them say the things I wanted them to say, and figured that by the end of the story, I would know how they would sound. Because I did try, I had one character, I'm like, this is kind of how I want them to sound. Well, by the end of the book, what they kind of developed into, it didn't make sense for them to sound that way. And it kind of grew its own voice, because I didn't focus on their voices. I just focused on telling the story from these points of view that I'm trying to tell, or make up as I go along, whichever. You feel really weird talking about fiction, because you spend your whole life, your first part of your life, you spend it being told, use your imagination, your imagination's magic, blah, blah, blah. Then the real world sucks. You need to live in the real world. Stop pretending. And then writing a fictional book, it's like, pretend everything. Like, wow. So
that's so exciting.
Yeah, so I'm really hoping that this week, and I promised myself that even if it's a bag of crap, it's going to be my bag of crap, and that David and I will go over. David's going back over it with me to make sure we don't see anything glaring. I even wrote the what's going to happen. It's in the next book, and I included an excerpt from the next book at the end of this book, after the epilogue, and kind of like a look ahead, and where things get a little spicier, darker. I mean, darker. It's not erotica. Like, I just realized how I sounded.
That's exciting. I mean, if people have been listening to our podcast since the beginning, we've been talking about your book writing.
Right.
So
this started as a 600-word thought that I sent to 4 different people with 4 different personalities, and just asked them what they thought of my tone, how I tell a story, if it's something they would ever pick up and read if it was put in front of them. And I got 4 yeses, and I picked 4 people that I felt would not care. I want them to care about my feelings, but for something like this, I don't want them to care about my feelings. I need honesty. I need them to tell me, oh God, I would never read that. Okay, why? Because you don't like to read, or because this sounds so unappealing and boring to you that you would rather off yourself? Because, there are several books I love to read, and there's several books I've read that I'm like, I get it that this is a classic, quote unquote, but oh my God, please. Jesus.
You'll have to let Gabe read it. I was telling him that we may have to have him on occasionally, because he's like reading like 1 or 2 books like a week. And
Yeah.
they're like some good books. So, I mean, I'm not a reader, as we've also talked about. So
But Cody did read one of my short
I
stories.
did read one of your short stories.
It was
It was
that
good.
was meant to be funny, and it was meant to have a comic spin on it, and then it got really grim
I was
and
going to
like
say, it was
dark.
not
It
funny. I
was
don't
not
know
funny at
what
all.
you're reading.
It got really
Or I think you
emotional.
wrote.
I don't know if I was acting out some deep-seated anxieties or what was
It was a
happening.
very emotional piece. So I don't know where it was going to be
You're like, what the
humorous.
heck was this?
One thing, so that's exciting. I can't wait till you finish it up. One thing that Matt was talking, or he sent me, and we were going to talk about it later in this episode, is we're going to be talking about these massacres that occurred across the country, and in mainly Black communities, and we're going to be talking specifically about the Tulsa Massacre. But in all of this, kind of wrapping up our Black History Month, we have talked in the past about different LGBT icons, like Marsha P. Johnson and others. Another one that I just wanted to mention up real quick, because I just heard, or I've known about him. We actually wrote something for our website a while back, but I do what?
No, Cody wrote this.
Sorry.
Yeah, credit where credit's due. It was Cody.
And I saw his name come up again last night, and it reminded me, oh, this would be perfect thing to talk about on the podcast, because we never talked about him really. We just mentioned him and said it was on our website. But it was Bayard Rustin, and he worked with Martin Luther King, and I thought it was so interesting because he was part of the civil rights thing, and kind of almost to a point helped put together the whole civil rights march in DC. But the one thing about it, he was a gay man, and he was arrested for having sex with men. And he actually, the governor of California last year provided clemency and pardoned him, because they're trying to go through the backlog of crimes in California and to get rid of crimes that concern his particular issue of just being with another man. That shouldn't be a crime. But yeah, I thought it would be interesting to talk about him because he worked with Martin Luther King, helped again the organization March on Washington D.C. for Jobs and Freedom, and he was really integral to the civil rights movement during that period of time. And then after that, he continued to fight and speak out on the importance of economic equality within the civil rights movement, because within the civil rights movement there's a lot of different levels to it, and economic equality is just one of the many things. He also, as a gay man, began to fight for social rights for gays and lesbians, and as we know, people of color in the LGBT community are marginalized even more than they already are for just being gay. And then in 2013, President Obama gave him the Medal of Freedom. But yeah, I thought it would be interesting just to kind of bring him up as we kind of wrap up this Black History Month. Of course, we talk about different people throughout the entire year, which I think is important to do. But Bayard Rustin, if you didn't know him, now you know a little bit about him, and he's a really interesting guy. So search him online and check out some more information about him, because his story is something you probably didn't know about, because when people talk about Martin Luther King, they don't really bring him up. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that he was gay, and there was some thoughts in people with Martin Luther King's group that thought that would be a distraction from the ultimate ideas that they wanted. So it's kind of like he was written out of history to a point, but if you look in deeply, you see other people are involved, within that. And that's the kind of thing we talk about on other things. There, we see one big figurehead a lot of times, but a lot of times there's a lot of other people under that person that are working just as hard to bring about different movements. But coming up next, we're going to be talking about the Tulsa Massacre. Okay, I'm actually going to bring up that thing you texted me. Not your nudes. And so we are back. And as we talked about, we're going to be talking about the Tulsa Massacre. But all this came about because Matt had sent me this little graphic talking about Black massacres in America. And so there's a lot of them. You probably don't know any of them, but there's a lot of them. One of them, the Tulsa Massacre in particular, came to a lot of people's attention this past year or so when the Watchmen series came out on HBO, and it is set in Tulsa and involves the Tulsa Massacre. And that's when you saw a lot of people online be like, hey, wait, what? That happened? We didn't know that happened. They thought it was fake because it was a TV show, but they were using some historical aspects to it to kind of educate while also entertaining. But there was, I didn't know about it.
I had heard about it, and it's only because I just happen to know people from Tulsa, and so my ex-husband is from the area, so I way back when I Googled the area because his family still lived out there, so I tried to Google it to just like learn something about where he was from, and I think I stumbled across it, but I didn't even connect it that I hadn't heard about it in school, where of course I feel like I should have learned about it.
Well, you should have, because it's considered the single worst incident of racial violence in American history, but no one's heard of it.
Right. And then it came back up, and I see mentions of it here and there, but I still didn't connect it until probably the past year or two, when one thing about Twitter that's really, it's bad in that it shows like you see how many people don't know something, but it's good in the sense of you see how many people don't know something. So seeing things posted and going, wait, no, that is what I thought it was. And it's so much worse than I thought it was. And it literally isn't in any history books generally taught within, the parameters of our normal history classes, but it's weird that people learn different things in different groups. Like I know people that didn't know that we deposed the last queen of Hawaii, there's a feeling like that, oh, well, she willingly did it and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, she signed the papers, but it wasn't like that. The Native people were not happy about that. She did it to protect her people. We did that. Like, we ruined that. But a lot of people don't know that yet. But I remember being taught that in second grade. And I was in Ohio at the time, and I remember our teacher showing us the book and teaching us how to pronounce Liliuokalani's name, because we practiced it, and it was being named Matt, obviously, like I thought it was so fascinating, and it stuck with me. And then of course getting older and learning, oh wow, why was that really wasn't taught, like how they became a state. It's not pretty, and the history and tensions are still very much alive. But the same thing, it's Black History Month, and I came across this on Twitter, and this guy had posted it and said, if you want to learn something, here's a list of massacres that are not taught, so pick one. And we cut off we didn't want to put out their private information. I'm always nervous about that, because I found this on Twitter, and they posted and said, learn something. And so I was like, hey, Cody, we should look at this, because a bunch of these I don't recognize. And it's one thing, I've not been in high school in a long time, but I am very, very sure most or all of these were never taught to me.
No, and I think that's one thing with the education system. It's designed in America. I can't speak around the world, but in America specifically, there's only like one or two companies that make books for schools. And so, a lot of it is the same throughout the country. Different parts here, added there, they can adapt it, I think. But in general, there is one kind of curriculum. And a lot of that because Texas buys so many books, because it's such a big populous state, they have really big sway in the curriculum that gets put into these books, which then goes throughout the country. But yeah, I just like to give a little highlight. We're going to go really in depth on this Tulsa Massacre, but it happened like around May 31st to June 1st.
Right. The whole thing was over in roughly 24 hours or something?
Yeah, like it was quick.
It's very quick, and much like, a couple years ago, Cody, it would have seemed very strange to explain an event like this, but in the last 5 to 10 years, well, in our adult lives, we have lived through how many one-time events, whether it be weather, something civil, something political, something judicial, like legislative. Literally we keep living through these once in a lifetime events that I know everybody is like, wow, can we not? But the problem is we're not taught about all these prior events, so history will repeat itself because we're humans and this is what we do. And history is also typically written by the victor. So the subjugation and domination of Black people in America, typically the history of it is written by white people. So when one group writes the history, that sets up the other side of this to say, well, it didn't really happen that way. It's like, well, you were the ones that one group dominated. So in this case, and what we're talking about is white people dominated an entire another group and wrote the history. And so that's why there's a lot of disagreement, but that's also what sets up, racism, because it sets it up as a systemic, it's systemic because from the time we enter school, we are taught, we do learn a little bit about the slave trade, and we have Black History Month, but they leave out a lot of the violence and a combination of ignoring it, not wanting to teach it, and I'm sure the whole for the children, we don't want to teach them about violence, we don't want to show them these violent things, but at the same time, lots of little Black children were mercilessly beaten and slaughtered in the process of this, so nobody showed them any mercy or sympathy. Why are we shielding little white eyes from what we did before so that we don't do it again?
It's really interesting just looking at history kind of things. Like you can take, I saw this thing on drunk history, where if you don't know, they get a semi-celebrity and they just have them drink a lot and then they tell a history story. And it's just really funny. And then they have other actors kind of acting out the person telling the story. So, they're drunk and they're telling the story. And so sometimes it can kind of mess up or a little bit. It's kind of funny. And they have the actors do that. But one of the things that I saw was talking about Rosa Parks. And there was actually another girl who had been doing stuff on the bus beforehand. And there's a whole series of events that caused Rosa Parks to be the one that people remember. But in reality, there was also someone else, a younger person, doing it as well. So history just is a really interesting thing to look at and see what you're seeing, what you're not fully seeing, and what is completely hidden. And in this case, the Tulsa Massacre, it was crazy. As you see here, it's completely the town is destroyed. And it would basically start when mobs of white residents, many of them actually were deputized and they were given weapons by city officials. And then they, in turn, attacked the Black residents, the businesses, all in this little district in Tulsa called the Greenwood District. And as I said, one of the single worst incidents of racial history in the United States. But you think pictures like that we would have heard about it again. And no, this whole area of the city was completely bombed out. And we didn't know about it.
So allegedly what happened was sometime during the day of June 31st, a Black teenager, Dick Rowland, entered an elevator. In the elevator was Sarah Page. She was the elevator operator, a white woman. And at some point, she screams, and Dick Rowland runs away. The next day, he's arrested for the sexual assault of Sarah Page. So from there, he is kept at the courthouse, and a group of white people show up, armed white people, show up that night in order to, they demanded the sheriff hand over the teenager, and the sheriff refused. So his men guarded the teenager on the top floor, and they, backed down. So approximately 9 p.m. So as we move into the evening, a group of about 25 armed Black men, including, these were World War I veterans as well, because remember, this is 1921. They went to the courthouse to attempt to guard Roland as well. The sheriff turned them away, and then some of the white mob attempted to break into the nearby National Guard armory. They were fortunately not successful. So now what has happened as we approach 10 p.m., this is the night of May 31st, a group of armed 75 black men returned to the courthouse at approximately 10 p.m. And, they are armed, and they are met by about 1,500 white men, some who are also armed, massively outnumbered. They retreat back to Greenwood, and then from there, all hell breaks loose. Throughout the night, groups of white men, white Tulsans, descend just on Greenwood and attack people. An unarmed man was shot in a movie theater. An unarmed black man was shot in the movie theater. Many of these the white Tulsans were deputized and given weapons by actual city officials. So sometime throughout this, there was a rumor that broke out that that there was a large-scale insurrection from among the black Tulsans, and that they were receiving help and reinforcements from nearby cities and populations groups with large black populations. So it kind of fanned the flames of what was happening. So some around sunset of June 1st, this thousand-strong group of white citizens continue just flooding into the Greenwood District. And that's where the looting and the burning of homes, businesses, and it encompassed about 35 city blocks. Firefighters did arrive, and they did try to help. However, they reported later that when they testified that rioters met them with guns and forced them back and forced them to leave. So, as I mentioned earlier, it was a Red Cross estimate that stated over 1,250 houses were burned, over 200 were looted, and then again, it was 2 newspapers, a school, library, hospital, churches, hotel, stores, and then again, countless black-owned businesses that were torched and burned, and destroyed, or damaged. So, just before noon of June 1st, the governor at the time, who was J.B.A. Robertson, he declared martial law right before noon. So the National Guard arrives, and this effectively ends the riot. So the guardsmen arrive, they start helping to put out the fires. But throughout this, they are putting people under arrest, and many of them black Tulsans. And by June 2nd, some 6,000 people are they're being guarded at their local fairgrounds. So after the riot ends, the investigation starts, and then within hours, all charges against Dick Rowland were dropped. The conclusion was that very likely he had stepped on her foot or bumped into her. There was no sexual assault, and it was a 2001 state commission examination that determined that they confirmed 36 dead, 26 black, and 10 white. But historians estimate that the death toll could have been maybe closer to 300. But it's noted that even by the estimates, the commission estimates of 36 people, it would make it the one of the deadliest riots in U.S. history. The only one ahead of that, using the number 36 at the time, would be the riots of 1863, the draft riots in New York, and that killed approximately 120 people. So you think 1863, that would have been the Civil War. So sans the Civil War, one of the deadliest ones was a riot that was started by a claim of sexual assault against a teenager who did not sexually assault or do anything other than likely just bump into this lady. And then it resulted in the deaths of so many people and a massive amount of damage. So the front page story was removed. It was not talked about. There was nothing public about it. As Cody and I have mentioned, we weren't taught this in school, and it's rarely mentioned. So now, of course, it's being talked about more, and there was a race riot commission saying that, to investigate it and try to actually get more details and investigate it. Now, keep in mind, it is now 100 years later. So they are trying to look into it, find there's people buried in unmarked graves, and The 2001 report of the Race Riot Commission concluded that between 100 and 300 were killed, and more than 8,000 people were made homeless within an 18-hour span in 1921. So there was a bill to try to teach about the race riot in 2012 in Oklahoma schools about the Tulsa race riot, and it actually failed. The opponents claimed the schools were already teaching their students about the riot. So, as Cody and I have talked about many times, Black history is erased from the Black narrative is completely erased from a situation, a decision, repercussions, and we see that here. The second deadliest riot we know of in history as far as riots go here, and we've not even been taught about it. And even an educational bill to make sure it's being taught, the pushback against, if the defense of the bill is, we're already teaching it, then what was the harm of passing it? This is problematic. And so we also know that history is typically written by the victor. So we learn that, for example, in our country, white people write the narrative. And so it's common for Black history to find that Black history is routinely erased or whitewashed or painted in a completely different light. So at this point, this is what we have. I'd encourage anybody to look into it more, sit down and read it for yourself. If you're watching this on YouTube, there's a graphic I sent Cody that has a map of all these massacres that were really not taught about in school. So you can take a screenshot and look them up yourself. I would really encourage anybody to do that. Go to history.com, go to websites, look them up. There's usually websites and memorials for them that do exist, even if they're not publicized, and you can learn all about them and who was affected and what happened. So I would just encourage anybody to do that. And Cody, I'm going to go ahead and stop it here.
It's one of those things, and you look at everything that occurred, and it's just like kind of shocking. I mean, I guess in some ways it's not shocking. Clearly, it's not shocking because we still deal with that racism today, and a lot of extreme violence at times. So it's not shocking and shocking at the same time. I think one of the craziest thing is, this is just one of the many that that was on that list that people can check out. And of course, if you're listening to this, we'll post it and repost it on the Twitter page at the ComaCast. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see the whole list, from Chicago to Springfield, New York, Washington, Philadelphia, Memphis, Clinton, Vicksburg, New Orleans. Like, it just goes on, and that's not even all of them. I didn't even name them all. But again, I just am stuck with the whole point that we were talking about at the beginning, that we don't know anything about any of these hardly. And so when you do go in depth and you look like we did with this Tulsa Massacre and just kind of see some of the highlights of it, to see how horrible and crazy it was, but to see that not to that level, because, we're saying that that's the most extreme that has happened, but versions of this in all these other places, and thankfully we don't have anything to that level happening these days, but you still have pockets of this throughout the entire country that I think a lot of people feel doesn't happen or doesn't exist.
Right. I think it was 1985. I did know that an entire Black neighborhood, like 3 city blocks or something like that, were bombed. I think it was in Philadelphia, and it was like, what the hell? And seeing how Black Lives Matter was treated all year. And, even here in San Antonio, I watched it. My own sister and parents, they were like, well, they shouldn't be in the streets. And, they were trying to tell me what happened. Like, I literally live here. I live here. I see this. And they were just, my sister only has Facebook, but Twitter, you can see more of the unedited things. So she's only seeing what's on, her Facebook news as she's scrolling, because she works her job and she just has her blinders on and isn't seeing it. And we're not exactly, close. So it's not like we have discussions often because she doesn't call. But when it came up, she goes, I really need to sit and watch this. And so I started telling her what I saw, and I sent her links and clips from Twitter because she told me what she saw. And I'm like, I think you're missing half the clip. and that happened. And we did have a few conversations over the summer, but if you remember when, for example, they were saying that, oh, Black Lives Matter burned down all these buildings and shot that off-duty cop who come to help in the head, and it turned out it was not Black Lives Matter. That most of them were agitators from white supremacist groups that did this, and they even, like, I remember these groups posting the video of that cop being shot in the head because they were trying to identify who was there. So we all saw this horrible graphic video of this guy having his life ended, and I watched it, and I was like, they're like, oh, all you people supporting BLM need to see this. And I sat and watched it, and I was like, but there's no evidence that it was a BLM person that did that. And then of course it turns out it wasn't anyway. And yeah, turns out that a lot of times it was absolutely white supremacists agitating a situation and starting it and starting the fights. And just here in San Antonio, I watched whole videos. When you watch the whole video, like, it shows like somebody throwing something at a cop or the fight happening. But what they didn't show is the first 2 minutes of the video where everybody was standing quietly. And then as soon as they thought the news reporters had turned the cameras off, they just started literally beating the absolute shit out of protesters who were standing there. Yeah. Absolutely just standing there. And
it's such craziness. Again, we'll post it on the Twitter page, repost it, that graphic that Matt was talking about with the Black Massacre, so you can do your own research on many of these and just educate yourself on those particular topics. I think today has been a good education experience. That's what we like to do here on the ComaCast, and we'll continue doing all of that. Of course, coming up, I believe on Friday, which is tomorrow, yay! We'll try to do a live stream around, I believe, 5 o'clock. And
5 o'clock
see
my time or your time?
Oh, that's true. 5 o'clock Pacific, 7 o'clock Central, 8
So it
o'clock
starts specifically
Eastern.
at 5?
Pacific 5.
I didn't want to talk to you about do you remember back in the day when things would be posted at 8, 7 Central? And I'm like, so is it on at 8 or 7? And I literally had no idea. I could not grasp it because we lived in Ohio at the time, and I lived in Florida until I was 24. So I lived in the Eastern time zone the first 24 years of my life. And since when did I move here? Oh, then I moved to PA, and I lived in Eastern there. And then when I was 30, I moved to Texas. So I've lived in Central the whole time since then. And I'm like, okay, what time does somebody want to do something? Because,
Yes. So 7, 8 Central. No, 7. Oh my God, I'm confusing everybody. No, it's going to be 7 o'clock Central, 7 o'clock Central, 8 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Mountain, 5 o'clock Pacific. Hope I didn't confuse everybody, but there we go. We'll post it on our Twitter page if we confused you. But 8 o'clock Eastern.
Cody's face right now, and he was like explaining it like
8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central, 6 o'clock Pacific, 5 o'clock. No, oh my God, it's a mess.
We'll post about it.
Tune in tomorrow, and it'll be fun. And thank you for joining us.
As always, you can join us on. You can search for us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all at the ComaCast. And of course, if you want to follow Cody, I am Cody Rodriguez?
I'm at Cody Rodriguez.
Oh no, you're at Cody Rodriguez. I'm Poetic AF. If you end up watching this later on YouTube or, on the website, of course, you're welcome to DM us any suggestions or anything you want to comment on, or if there's something maybe you heard that you didn't feel was accurate, please let us know. We absolutely want to correct anything that might have been perceived, that if we interpreted it incorrectly, or there's something we, made a glaring error, because this is the first time either of us have been able to sit and really read about it and learn about it ourselves. So we want to make sure that we are putting out the most accurate and information possible. So, but again, thank you all for listening, and we will see you hopefully when you see this at our live, from when recording. So tomorrow night when we do this live.
Bye.